On December 16th, 2000, a young man, a husband, a father, and a promising professional, left home to go duck hunting in Tallahassee, Florida, and never came back. His name was Mike Williams. The official explanation seemed simple: a hunting accident, a drowning, maybe even alligators involved. But something was wrong. There was no body, no life jacket, no blood, just silence. And while many accepted that version, one person never did. His mother, Cheryl Williams, who for 17 years moved heaven and earth to prove her son had not been the victim of chance. What looked like a tragedy would soon become one of Florida's darkest and most unbelievable cases, exposing family secrets, hidden betrayals, and a deadly conspiracy. And before we dive deeper into the story, let me invite you. If you enjoy true crime cases told with depth and without fillers, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell. It really helps bring more stories like this and ensures you won't miss the next ones. Now, get ready to discover in detail the disappearance of Mike Williams, a chilling tale of love, greed, and a mother's relentless fight for the truth. To understand the weight of this case, we first need to know who Mike Williams was. Mike was born and raised in Tallahassee, the capital of Florida, son of Cheryl and the oldest sibling in a humble family. He was always described as determined, disciplined, and clear about his dreams. Even as a teenager, he worked hard to earn his place in the world. He believed in daily effort and wasn't someone who took shortcuts. As an adult, he built a solid career in real estate and finance. By the age of 31, he had already achieved a level of stability that many people would take decades to reach. He earned well, owned a comfortable home, and had ambitious plans for the future. But beyond his professional life, there was his personal world. Mike married Denise, his high school sweetheart. Together they had a daughter, who became the center of his universe. Friends and colleagues said Mike was a loving, hands-on father, proud and devoted, always striving to give the best to his family, to the community. They looked like the perfect couple, living the American dream in Florida. Mike also maintained a lifelong friendship with Brian Winchester, whom he had known since school. They were close, almost like brothers. That friendship lasted for years, built on trust and constant presence. What no one could imagine was that this bond would later reveal a dark, twisted side. Up to this point, Mike seemed to have it all: professional success, a stable family, loyal friends. But behind this facade of perfection, cracks were beginning to show. Financial pressures, large life insurance policies, hidden desires, all these elements would slowly intertwine, building the foundation of the sinister plot behind his disappearance. From here, the peaceful routine of a young family man would turn into a massive mystery. A disappearance without a trace that would lead to nearly 2 decades of pain, suspicion, and disturbing revelations. It was the early morning of December 16th, 2000. Winter had already settled in Florida, and the cold air cut through the skin. At dawn, Mike Williams left home for what was supposed to be just another one of his duck hunting trips. Dressed for the freezing weather, he loaded up his boat and headed toward Lake Seminole, a vast reservoir surrounded by swamps and thick vegetation on the Florida-Georgia border. For those who knew him, nothing seemed unusual. Mike was an experienced hunter, familiar with every detail of that region, and he never underestimated the risks. But that morning, something went terribly wrong. Mike never returned home. He didn't answer calls. He missed appointments. As the hours passed, unease turned into dread. By the end of the day, his family and friends knew something was very wrong. Search efforts began with urgency. Boats patrolled the lake. Helicopters scanned from above. Divers swept through the murky waters. What they found was puzzling. Mike's boat, stuck near the shoreline, his truck parked nearby, and some personal belongings inside the vessel. But there was no sign of his body. The authorities were quick, perhaps too quick, to settle on an explanation: a hunting accident. According to their narrative, Mike had fallen into the water, drowned, and possibly been devoured by alligators, which were common in the area. It was a convenient story, one that tied up loose ends without raising further questions. Yet, glaring problems surfaced. Mike was a strong swimmer and extremely cautious. He knew the dangers of the lake and always wore a life jacket. Still, no life jacket was ever found. No shotgun, No clothing. Nothing to support the accident theory. Even experts cast doubt on the alligator explanation. The reptiles usually stash remains of their prey nearby, but nothing was ever recovered. Despite the inconsistencies, just a few months later, authorities officially ruled the case a presumed death. There was no body, no complete funeral, just a void filled with bureaucratic paperwork. Soon after, Denise, his wife, filed an insurance claim, collecting $1 million payout. For many, the story ended there. Another tragic disappearance with no answers. But one person refused to accept that version. Cheryl Williams, Mike's mother. While authorities closed files, she wrote letters, pressured journalists, and begged for the case to be reopened. For Cheryl, silence wasn't closure. It was a scream that something much darker was being covered up. Mike's disappearance wasn't just the start of an investigation. It was the opening act of a chilling story. A lake that should have held only the secrets of nature became the silent accomplice to a plot of betrayal, greed, and a truth buried 6 feet under. While authorities closed Mike Williams' case as a presumed death, for his mother, Cheryl Williams, the story was just beginning. To her, nothing made sense. Her son was careful, a skilled swimmer, and would never go out without a life jacket. The official version sounded like a poorly stitched excuse, designed to wrap up an uncomfortable matter quickly. Cheryl refused to accept silence. Every day, for years, she wrote letters to politicians, sheriffs, prosecutors, and journalists. She knocked on doors, begging for a deeper investigation. While neighbors moved on with their lives, she turned the search for her son into her own survival mission. She was an ordinary woman with no resources, but with determination that defied the system. For more than a decade, Cheryl fought a lonely war against time, indifference, and what seemed to be a conspiracy of silence. What drew the most suspicion was how quickly everything had been closed. Denise, the wife, had swiftly collected the $1 million life insurance. At her side, Mike's best friend, Brian Winchester, was becoming more and more present. This closeness raised red flags for Cheryl, but with no concrete evidence, her claims were dismissed as the desperate words of a grieving mother. Still, she never backed down. For 17 years, she kept the case alive, speaking on radio shows, giving interviews to local media, and pressuring the state. Her persistence was a single thread that prevented Mike's story from being forgotten. In that time, rumors began to circulate in Tallahassee. Whispers that Mike's disappearance wasn't an accident at all, but part of something far darker. Each unproven lead was quickly discarded by the police. Yet Cheryl saved everything, noted everything, collecting details as if she were piecing together an invisible puzzle. Cheryl's fight wasn't just for justice. It was also for memory. She refused to let her son's name be swallowed by the lake, buried along with the supposed accident. And it was this resistance that kept the flame alive. Until years later, a series of explosive events would finally expose the truth. Over time, the cracks in the official version of Mike Williams' disappearance became impossible to ignore. And in that silence, scattered pieces began to surface. Fragments that, once connected, would reveal a far darker truth. The first point of suspicion was a relationship between Denise Williams and Brian Winchester. Officially, they were just a grieving widow and a loyal best friend. But in practice, their behavior raised eyebrows. Brian, once seen as Mike's brother-in-arms, was suddenly present in every corner of Denise's life. He offered emotional support, helped with the daughter, went on trips, attended events. To the community, what looked like companionship soon began to feel like intimacy. The question lingered. Had this relationship started only after Mike's disappearance, or was it already happening in secret? Old rumors spoke of discreet meetings, long stares, and a closeness that now seemed charged with another meaning. Then came the issue of money. Shortly after the tragedy, Denise collected over $1.7 million in life insurance policies. And these weren't just any policies. They had been carefully set up with the involvement of Brian, who conveniently worked as an insurance agent. To Cheryl, this wasn't coincidence. It was calculation. Publicly, Denise shaped herself into the image of the perfect widow, modest, quiet, devoted entirely to her daughter. She knew how to play the role expected by the conservative society of Tallahassee. Brian, meanwhile, slowly transitioned from support system to official partner. The best friend of the missing husband had quietly stepped into his place, a fact that for many was scandalous, though rarely spoken out loud. Piece by piece, what once looked like unfortunate fate now took the form of a story of greed, betrayal, and conspiracy. For Cheryl, the conclusion was obvious. Denise and Brian weren't bystanders. They were at the center of the puzzle surrounding Mike's death. While the city pretended life was normal, Cheryl documented everything. She saved clippings, wrote notes, gathered whispers from neighbors, like someone assembled a mosaic of lies waiting to be exposed. The problem was that, without hard evidence, her warnings were dismissed as the grief of a mother in denial. And so, for years, silence prevailed. Denise built her life with Brian. The community chose not to comment, and the police kept the files closed. But with every step, with every gesture, the couple left invisible traces. Traces that one day would be illuminated, proving that the lake was never the true culprit, but rather the carefully constructed conspiracy beyond it. For more than 15 years, Denise and Brian lived behind a fragile facade of normality. At first glance, they were simply two people who had found comfort in each other after a tragedy. But behind closed doors, the relationship was poisoned by jealousy, mistrust, and constant manipulation. What began as a secret pact turned into a psychological prison, a bond haunted by the truth they tried to bury, yet one that slowly devoured them from within. In 2016, that castle of silence collapsed in dramatic fashion. Brian Winchester, consumed by paranoia and desperate to maintain control, made a reckless decision. Armed, he kidnapped Denise in her own car. For hours, in a storm of threats and tears, he begged her not to leave him while letting slip confessions that had never before been spoken aloud. Brian's arrest was swift, but the abduction cracked open a door that would change everything. Facing the likelihood of a long sentence, he sought a deal, and with it came a revelation as cruel as it was calculated. Brian detailed how, on that December morning in 2000, he lured Mike Williams to the lake under the guise of a hunting trip. The plan was cowardly but simple. Push him into the water and let him drown. But Mike fought back. He refused to sink. When the plan unraveled, Brian took the final step. He raised his shotgun and fired at his childhood friend at point-blank range. Then, coldly, he dragged the body into a remote swamp, burying it where he believed nature would erase every trace. His words carried a double weight. They revealed not only the brutality of the murder, but also Denise's complicity. She was the one who collected the $1 million insurance payout, the one who kept the pact of silence for nearly 2 decades. For Tallahassee, a community that had long whispered rumors and suspicions, the confirmation was staggering. What had once been dismissed as conspiracy theories was now undeniable truth, straight from the killer himself. In 2017, authorities recovered Mike's remains exactly where Brian had indicated. The swamp revealed what the lake never could hide. Irrefutable proof that Mike Williams had not been claimed by nature, but by a cold and deliberate plot engineered by the two people he trusted most. For Cheryl Williams, it was both agony and vindication. For years, her persistence had been dismissed as denial, even madness. Yet in the end, her refusal to let go was the very reason the truth surfaced. The case had finally turned. After 17 years, the secret was unearthed, and Denise's mask was about to shatter in court. With Brian Winchester's arrest and his shocking confession, the case that had once seemed buried beneath the waters of Lake Seminole was now under the spotlight of justice. Yet one unavoidable question remained. What was Denise Williams' true role in this crime? For Cheryl, there was never any doubt. From the very beginning, she believed her daughter-in-law was not a victim of circumstance, but an active accomplice in the conspiracy that stole Mike's life. And when Denise was finally indicted, the courtroom became the stage where the mask she had carefully worn for nearly 2 decades would begin to crumble. During the trial, the image of the devoted mother and grieving widow fell apart. Prosecutors laid out life insurance policies, financial records, and most damning of all, the testimony of Brian Winchester. In chilling detail, he recounted how Denise encouraged the crime, how they spoke about her dissatisfaction with the marriage, how the insurance payout would become their escape. Each word painted Denise not as an unsuspecting widow, but as a woman who had not only known about the plan, but had helped design it. The defense fought back, portraying Denise as a fragile woman trapped in an abusive relationship, manipulated by a controlling man. But the narrative collapsed under the weight of the facts. Denise had not only collected more than $1.7 million from Mike's insurance, but had also built a life of comfort with Brian on the ruins of her husband's disappearance. In the gallery, Cheryl sat in silence. Every document, every photo, every testimony was another blade twisting in a wound that had never healed. Yet it was also validation. What had once been dismissed as the desperate ramblings of a grieving mother was now being recognized in a court of law. In 2018, after days of intense testimony, the jury reached its verdict: guilty. Denise Williams was convicted of conspiracy, insurance fraud, and accessory to first-degree murder. The sentence: life in prison. The verdict echoed far beyond Florida. National outlets covered the case, highlighting the chilling contrast between Denise's public image and the grim reality of her role in a calculated crime. Tallahassee, once resigned to treating the case as an unsolved mystery, now faced the undeniable truth. This tragedy had been orchestrated within the very walls of the family. For Cheryl, the moment was both devastating and liberating. She would never get her son back, but at last she saw justice acknowledge what she had fought for nearly 2 decades to prove. Walking out of the courtroom, Cheryl was no longer just the inconsolable mother. She was a woman whose persistence tore down a wall of silence and proved that love can be stronger than conspiracy. The trial of Denise Williams did more than close a case. It became a symbol of perseverance and a stark reminder of how greed, betrayal, and lies can hide behind the most perfect facades. The Mike Williams case did not end within the walls of the courtroom. Its impact echoed far beyond Florida, sparking conversations about greed, trust, and the role of a mother's love in pursuit of justice. In the Tallahassee community, the story left deep scars. For years, many had accepted the official version of an accident, but when the truth surfaced that Mike had been brutally murdered, and by those who were supposed to love him, it was a collective shock. The realization was chilling. If something like this could happen in a seemingly perfect family, it could happen anywhere. The figure of Denise Williams became a grim reminder of how social masks can hide dangerous secrets. To neighbors, she was a devoted wife, a caring mother. In reality, she was entangled in a conspiracy driven by money and the desire to start over with another man. The contrast between image and truth was devastating, exposing just how fragile appearances can be. Yet amid the devastation, one figure emerged with almost superhuman strength: Cheryl Williams. Her perseverance showed the world that truth can be buried for years, but never destroyed. She challenged authorities, endured skepticism, and carried the weight of a lonely battle that often seemed hopeless. In the end, her unshakable faith in her son forced justice to prevail. The case also raised broader questions. How far can greed drive a person? How far is someone willing to go to escape a marriage or secure easy money? And above all, what does it say about trust when betrayal comes from those closest to us? The story of Mike Williams is more than a crime solved after 17 years. It is a painful lesson about love, loyalty, and the darkness that can hide behind the most innocent of smiles. A reminder that sometimes justice is only possible because someone, even alone, refuses to give up. The case of Mike Williams proves that truth can be silenced, manipulated, and even buried for years, but it can never be erased. It took 17 years of lies, silence, and suffering before justice finally arrived. A story fueled by greed, betrayal, and the relentless strength of a mother who refused to give up. Looking at this case today, it's impossible not to reflect. How far can ambition drive a person? How do you trust when betrayal comes from those closest to you? And what does this tragedy teach us about resilience and perseverance? One thing is undeniable: Cheryl Williams' legacy. Her fight turned forgotten case into a symbol of justice. She showed that sometimes a single voice is enough to break through a wall of silence and expose a truth that many prefer to ignore. And now I want to hear from you. Do you believe justice was truly served in this case? Did Denise deserve life in prison? Or should her sentence have been different? Share your thoughts in the comments. I'd really like to know how you see this story. If this video moved you, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. It really helps bring more true stories like this one and ensures you won't miss the next cases. Because in the end, the Mike Williams case reminds us that truth may take time to surface, but it always finds a way.